Okay, so in last class, in Java last class, so we have seen how to create instance variables, static variables, instance methods, and static methods we have seen, right? And also how to use instance variable, where to use instance variable, and where to use static methods and instance methods, and how many ways we can create methods, okay, method categories. All these things we have discussed, and also I have explained one real-time example, bank transaction. Okay, so when I'm writing, like I'm using some keywords, right? Okay, so we already discussed what is the keyword and what is variable and what is data type. So if you observe the keywords, see, if you observe any keyword, all these keywords are in small letters. And also all these keywords are in small letters. Okay, so we have one more keyword. Let me write that. So if you observe here, so this particular keyword is having two words. Okay, one is instance and another one also of OF. There are two words in this logic name. Okay, even though we have more than one word, okay, so your keyword always will be in small letters. Okay, so here we are also creating the logic. Okay, for this logic, what is the name we given? So we given the name as withdraw. Okay, as per the coding standards, so we are following camel case. So to differentiate user-defined logics and predefined logics. Okay, to differentiate user-defined logics. User-defined logics means the logics which we create. The logics which we create. And the predefined logics are, all the keywords are predefined logics. Okay, all the keywords always in smaller case only. Okay, to recognize easily, and also when you use any IDE, so you can easily differentiate by its color. Okay, for keywords, it is some purple color. For static and instance variables, we have blue color. Okay, for normal variables, we have black color. Okay, and also the parameters. So like that, we have different colors, so you can easily identify. Okay, suppose if you are writing your Java programming in some Notepad or some Notepad++, so that time you cannot differentiate, right? So what is the keyword and what is the variable? So we have some coding standards, those we are following. That is fine. So again, to differentiate user-defined logics and predefined logics, all the predefined logics, all the keywords are in smaller case only. Okay, so when you are writing some program, you should not follow this approach. And also you should not use the keyword as variable name or method name. Suppose if I want to declare some int instance of equals to 10. Okay, so you cannot use like this, because when you use this, your compiler feels like it is a logic. Okay, you should not use keywords as your names of your logics or variables. Okay, data variables or logics, you should not use keyword name. Okay, all the keywords are in smaller case. Okay, let me write it separately. Keywords are in smaller case. Okay, so when you are creating any package, okay, I have created different packages right here. When you are creating the packages, your package name must be in smaller case. Again, your package name must be in smaller case. Okay, so in your program you will import those packages. Okay, here my package name is encapsulation. Suppose if you want to access some other class like other package classes or other package interfaces or enums. Okay, to differentiate again while importing, suppose let me take, so here we have okay, operators example is there, right? Suppose if I want to use this operator example class into my this like encapsulation bank transactions class, you just simply need to import it. Okay, so just simply, okay, let me create object for, or let me okay, operators example. Okay, so when you press control space, okay, operators example, it is in demo package. So new, is taking time. New operator example. Okay, so if you want to use this class, if you want to create an object and if you want to use those logics, you must import that particular class to your current package and also current class or interface or enum. Okay, while importing, to differentiate these classes and the package name, you must follow the package name, you must follow as smaller case. You must follow package naming convention as smaller case. So if you observe predefined packages, see, all these are in smaller case. Suppose if you have more than one word, in that case you have to separate with the dot. Okay, so all these packages are in smaller case. See, if I expand any other package, inside that also, see, all these are in smaller case. We have some special packages for those. Okay, we give uppercase also. When to give uppercase, that I will explain later. But if you observe all these predefined packages, all are in smaller case. Okay, so you must follow the same notation. Okay, these are the coding standards you must follow. So if you expand any package, okay, so you can see all are in smaller case. This is one more rule. All the package names should be in smaller case. Okay, so you must follow these rules. Okay, so let's start our actual Java programming. Okay, so let me take separate, let me create separate class to explain the new topics. Okay, so minimize it. So in encapsulation only, still we are discussing encapsulation. Okay, what is encapsulation? How we can create the data into, how we can store the data into memory location, how we can process that data, and how we can secure our data, and how we can provide the access to our data and our logics. That comes under encapsulation. Okay, so see, so in general example, okay, so generally we use capsules, right? Like medical capsules. Whenever we see, we use medical capsules, right? So what is capsule? So inside capsule, you will have some medicine. Okay. Similarly, so you can consider this bank transaction as a capsule. Okay. Inside that, you have some content. Okay. So for this capsule, how you will provide access? Okay, how you will pass data to this capsule. So all this comes under encapsulation. So you are encapsulating the data. Okay, that is the reason the name is given as encapsulation. Okay, so let me create one new class. Okay, so I'm creating the class as constructor example. This is the very important constructor example. Okay, so whenever we create, the main method is must. Okay, so suppose if you are creating some hundreds of packages, some hundreds of classes, okay, for a single project. So generally we create only one method. Okay, so we have to provide the relation among all these classes, and all those logics we have to call into main method only. Only one main method only we use in entire Java project. So using unit test libraries like JUnit, TestNG, NUnit. Okay, so we have different libraries using which, so we can execute our logic without main method. How to do that we will discuss later. So today we will discuss what is constructor and also what is wrapper class. So if time permits, I will also explain object class. Okay. So let me create int a equals int a. Okay. So let me take from other class. So from here, okay, so here we have, so let me copy this. I'm declaring as global variables. Okay, so let me remove the values. I just declare. Char 2 not required, just char 1. And also we have Boolean. Yeah, this is required. So basically, I'm just declaring all the data types. Just a declaration. Okay, I'm not assigning anything. Okay, string we have. Okay, let me define the string also. Just declare the string object. Yes, and also yeah. So these are the data types we have. Okay, these are all our predefined data types. So here also I'm creating int or so let me copy all these to here. Let me rename it as 2. So these are the global variables and these are local variables. Okay, so here if I want to access all these global variables, how I can access? How I can access global variables? Somebody tell me how we can access global variables.
Create instance.
So, so suppose if you have static variables, okay, if you have static variables like this, okay, you can directly access with the class name or you can directly access inside your static methods, okay, and instance method also. Suppose if you don't have the static, which means memory is not allocated for your global variables. If you use static, memory will be allocated by your JVM. So this is the thumb rule. This is the basic rule you have to remember every time. So now, if you want to access all these instance variables, so you have to create a instance for it. These are the instance variables. If you want to access, you have to create the instance. Okay, if I use static, no need to create the instance because memory will be allocated by your JVM. Okay, so let's see. So instead of this, okay, okay. So let me declare like this. So when you use semicolon, so which means this is separate statement. This is separate statement like that. It will take. Okay, that is the use of semicolon. Okay, so you can use semicolon for your method also. You can put for your method also. But by default, when you close any bracket, it takes as a it is a separate block. If you want, you can put the semicolon at the end of the method also. Okay, so let me write in a single line. Okay, all these data types. These are the global variables I have defined here. Okay, local variables similarly. So now what I do is, okay, let me do one thing. So here also, I have static variables and instance variables. Static variables and instance variables. These are instance. I already created. Okay, this should be 2. Okay, so let me declare these values as 3, local variables as 3. Okay, so for editing all these things, it is taking more time, but be patient. Okay, this is very, very important class. Okay, I want to print global variables. Okay, I want to print global variables. So static you can print directly, right? Static values you can print directly. Because when you static, by default, your JVM will allocate the memory for your static variables. Then you can access. They are Boolean, string, and object. Okay, so instead of writing into multiple lines, I'm writing in a single line. Okay, do not confuse. Okay, so now if I want to use my instance variables, okay, here I'm static variables I'm printing. This is declaration only. Okay, this is also declaration. And this is local variables declaration. So local variables memory will be allocated when you are executing this method. Okay, for global variables, by default, if you use static, memory will be allocated by JVM. Okay, while loading the class only, it will allocate the memory, class loading time. So that we have seen, right, like the architecture of Java execution, the flow of Java execution we have seen, right? So let me open that screenshot again. So in day 1 only, so we have discussed how this execution will happen. Okay, in interviews also they will ask you. Okay, for static variables, how you can access static variables, okay, without creating the object, what happens in the backend. Okay, so for static variables, while loading the class, okay, in JVM, after creating the class in JVM, again you have loaders and executors. So first it will load the class, after that it will execute the class. Okay, while loading the class, it will allocate the memory for your static variables, not for instance. Okay, so if you want to use instance variables, okay, you have to allocate the memory. Why you have to allocate the memory? So generally, if you have some common data, okay, as per our bank transaction example, we have seen that if we have some common data for all our operations, okay, that we have to store as a static data. Okay, in bank transaction, so we did some operations, display balance, withdrawal, and also deposit. Okay, withdrawal, deposit, and also display balance logics we have written to perform the operation, right? So if you want to perform these operations in a common data, so where we have to take, like which variable we have to use, static variable. Okay, if we have some common data, so if you want to perform operations on that common data, so that data you have to take it as a static variable. Okay, so if you have some separate operation, Okay, suppose if you have multiple like bank customers are there, multiple bank customers are there. In that case, will you allocate a common balance for all the customers? No, right?
No.
So when we have multiple like different instances, different customers when we have, so we have to create memory every time for each and every customer. Okay, suppose if you want to create multiple copies, multiple more than one copy, in that case you have to go with the instance. Okay, so when you create multiple copies, so in the backend it occupies more memory, right? Okay, more memory it occupies, right? And also your JVM doesn't understand, like doesn't know that how many copies I have to create, how many duplicates I have to create, it doesn't know. Okay, how many copies it has to create, it doesn't know. So that is the reason. If you want to create a multiple copies, different copies, so that is your choice. Okay, to minimize the memory, whenever you require, just create it and use it. Okay, multiple copies. So you have to create memory for your instance variables. New, what is the notation? You have to use the class name and you have to put the parenthesis. So what is this notation? Generally, what is this notation? So let me open this. So whenever we create method to differentiate, okay, what is the notation we are using for method to differentiate variables and methods? So method should be ends with parenthesis, right? So similarly, here also with your class name, okay, you are calling the method. Here you are calling the method. Here you are calling the method. But where is this method? Where is this method? And also when you use new and when you call this method, it will allocate the memory for your instance variables. Suppose if you want to access those instance variables, you can create a reference and you can access with it, right? So simply you can access with this variable. So when you use the reference, okay, it represents the instance memory location. Okay, so memory, how it creates the memory also I have explained. Okay, that also I will open. Similarly, you have string. Okay, so this is print instance variables. Okay, if you want to print instance variables, you must allocate memory for your instance variables, then only you can print. Okay, similarly, we have local variables, right? Local variables. Let me print local variables. Print local variables. So my local variables are 3, 3, and 3. Okay. So if you observe here, when I use local variables, these variables, okay, when I try to print, these are giving error. Why these are giving error? Because no memory is allocated for these variables. No memory is allocated now, as of now. Just declared only. When memory will be allocated? When this method is executing, okay, then when this method is executing, that time only these will be for these variables will be memory will be allocated that you can process. But here no memory is allocated. When you try to print, your compiler immediately gives you the error. Okay, why it is giving the error? So in execution time it will allocate the memory, right? But again, why it is giving the error? So if you take static, or if you take instance, or if you take local, without having the data, you cannot process it. If you don't assign any data, you cannot process the data with any method. Okay, but here also we don't have any data, right? But why it is not giving error? So for these we don't have data, but it is giving the error. Okay, the reason is, so when we use static keyword, okay, when we use static keyword, by default, your class loaders, okay, your JVM allocates, your JVM assigns default values to your static variables. Suppose, let me comment these two sections and let me run it. Yeah. So if you observe here, okay, when you print byte, it is printing 0. Short, for short it is printing 0. Int also 0. Long also 0. Float 0.0. Double 0.0. Char some empty space. Boolean by default value is false. For all other non-primitive data types, how we can identify? First letter always starts with the capital letter. Okay, string. If you take the string, okay, the name, it is starting with capital letter. If you take the object, it is starting with the capital letter. Suppose if you create constructor example variable, that is also starting with capital letter. For all your user defined data types, non-primitive data types, or reference data types, always the default value is none. Okay, if you declare outside only, if you create it as a local here like this, again there will be no default value will be assigned. Just if you declare like this, no default value will be assigned to it. You will get the error. Again, if I try to print like this, I will get the error. Okay, this is also local variable. Okay, so your JVM backend, it is assigning the default values. Okay, based on the type of number. These are normal numbers. These are decimal numbers. For char, it is by default it is giving the space, empty space. Boolean false, and all other reference data types, non-primitive data types, by default it assigns none. Okay, so similarly, when you use instance variables, again, let me print again. So to differentiate, what I do is, static variables. These are static variables. So these are instance. Instance variables, and these are local variables. Okay, so if I run it, so again for my instance variables also, okay, for local static variables it is assigned default values. Instance variables also it is assigning the default values. Who is assigning? Okay, for static variables, JVM is assigning the default values. But who is assigning default values to your instance variables? Okay, so here when we use this notation, this method notation with new keyword in the backend, what happens is this method, this particular method will assign the default values to your instance variables. Okay, so this method by default exists in our program. Okay, when I create any class, by default it will also creates, your class also creates one method. By default it hidden, by default it is hidden. Even though it is hidden, by default it works, it executes. Whenever you call, it will execute. Okay, whenever you are calling this, so immediately this method will assign the values to your instance variables. But coming to local, okay, so for local you cannot assign any value, default value, or default value you cannot assign with JVM or your constructor. So technically this method, to differentiate methods and this notation, this method, this is also method notation, right? To differentiate this we call it as constructor, and this we call it as method. Okay, so constructor, the name itself is giving the meaning. What is constructor? It is constructing the values. It is constructing the values. Okay, to your data. It is constructing the data to your variables. Okay, by default data it is constructed. So if you want to modify that default data, so through the constructor you can modify it. Okay, so here for local variables, your constructor cannot assign the data, and your static keyword also cannot assign the data to your local variable. Suppose if you try to use static, okay, you cannot use static keyword for your local variables. So it cannot. So like your JVM cannot allocate the memory if you don't use the static keyword, and also we cannot use static keyword for our local variables. And also if you want to consider these values as instance instance variables. Okay, when you use constructor, your constructor also cannot assign the values to your local variables. Okay, you must initialize the value if you want to use your local variables. Suppose if you want to use your local variables, you must initialize. You have to initialize. Okay, let me add default values again to your local variables. So whenever you assign the data to your local variables, so one by one error is going away, right? Okay, so to specify it as a float, or if you specify it as a double, you have to use you have to specify or you can also use L. Okay, and coming to your char. In single quotes, just put the space. Boolean, so by default it is false. String, okay, if you don't assign anything, if you don't want to put anything, okay, so here when you put like this is also, it takes as a one character. Okay, if you don't want to assign anything, you can assign none. Similarly for object, okay, so these are three, right? Three, three, three. So these are local variables. These are local variables. So let me cut it. See, whenever I assign any value, okay, so here these errors are disappear. Okay, so we have object also. So all your referenced data types, non-primitive data types, you can assign by default value as none. Okay, so local variables, before using, you have to allocate, you have to assign the values. Static variables and instance variables. For static variables, by default, your JVM will allocate while loading the class. For instance variables, again, when you create the memory, your constructor will assign the values. Okay, when you run it, so you can see these three default values. Okay, so coming to constructor. Okay, constructor is assigning the values, right? Okay, constructor also a method. So this method we call it as a special method of a class. Special method of class. So this constructor, by default, it is assigning the default values, right? Okay, so instead of assigning these values, what you can do, you can also assign directly. Okay, suppose you can directly assign, suppose let me add byte 10. Okay, so short 100, int 1000, long some 10,000. Float some 100 point some 00. Okay, so similarly double some 1000.00d. And char, I want to assign some character. Boolean, so by default it is false. I want to assign as true. Okay, so these must be 2, right? 1, not 1. So if you use 2, so for static also you can assign the values with constructor. But the constructor usage is to allocate the memory for your instance variables and also assign the values to your instance variables, not for static. Static JVM will allocate. If you want to override, you can override with the constructor. Okay, so this is a little bit important. Okay, the string 2 you can assign as some string. Instead of null, you can assign hello. Object, as you know that you can assign any type of value to your object. Okay, so which I like anything I can assign, right? So what I do is I assign my class object value. Okay, instead of taking some this data, I want to assign my class object. Okay, when you print it, when you run it, Okay, so by default, so these values only will be printed. Okay, because your constructor is calling while creating your object. Okay, so now, so what happened? Some error it is giving. Something is happened. What is this? Stack overflow exception. What is stack overflow exception? Why we are getting? Okay. The problem is, so whenever I call this object, in the backend, it is calling this method, right? Again, in this statement, again it is calling this constructor. It is coming to the statement again after printing all this. Again, it is calling the constructor. Like that, it is keep on calling this constructor. So that is the reason we are getting stack overflow. Okay, you can assign as a null. Okay, now let me run it. See, if you observe here, the values which I assigned through constructor, I'm able to access. Sorry, I am able to print. Okay, so here you have a option to initialize the values, instance values through constructor. So, and this constructor notation, if you observe, this is like a method. This is like a method. So what are the options we have for the method? The same thing, the same features, methods features we can apply for constructor. Okay, so we are writing in different ways, right? Methods, but there are two conditions. Okay, so in this special method, okay, you cannot, through this special method, you cannot store the data. Result value you cannot store. The first basic rule is the result value you cannot store. If you are unable to store your result value, okay, no need to use any void or int or any return type of keywords. You cannot use return keyword, as well as you cannot use the memory allocator keyword. Okay, that is the basic thing. You cannot return the value through constructor, just to process only, just to initialize the value, or if you want to perform some logic, that also you can do. Okay, so all the other things you can apply. So when we remove this return type, okay, so your methods, if you remove return type, okay, where is our day 7? So let me open day 7. So class notes. Yeah. So when we have return keyword, these become 4. Okay, if you don't have the return keyword, or we can write methods with parameters, without parameters only, right? Methods without parameters, with parameters. So for constructor, we can write in these two ways. With parameters we can write, and without parameters also we can write. So instead of hard coding the values, what I can do is these values I can assign through the local variables. Okay, so local variables are nothing but if you pass any value through your method, that comes under local variables. Just in day 7 we have discussed it. Okay, now what I do is instead of assigning the values directly through parameters, I will assign. Okay, you can have global variables names and local variables names you can use same. But if you want to differentiate local variables and global variables, again we have to use the notation, this dot notation, this notation. Okay, so here now, so we have one more error. Huh? Yeah. So here, what you are doing is you are just simply again assigning the values to your local variables. These are local variables. Again, you are assigning values to your local variables. If you want to differentiate global variables and local variables, so if both the names are same, you have to use the this keyword. Okay, if you have different names, no need to use the, suppose if you use this local variable as 3, no need to use this keyword. Okay, but if you have same names, by default, it gives the priority to your local variables. It takes as a local variable. Okay, to differentiate it, what you can do is you can use this keyword. Okay, let me use this keyword to differentiate local variables and global variables. So see, these local variables up to this constructor only. Do not confuse. There is no relation between main method local variables and this local variable, this constructor local variables. Okay, so now what you can do is, instead of assigning these values, instead of assigning these values directly, through parameters we can assign. Through parameters we can assign. So which means when you allocating the memory for your instance variables, that time you can initialize the value. Initialize the value. Okay, this is very, very important for our Selenium classes. We definitely use this to initialize different objects. Okay, so now what I have to do is, so when you change it to parameterized constructor like this, the default constructor will not work. Default constructor means here we are using some default method, right? It won't work now. It won't work now. So when you create the same constructor with parameters, the default constructor, it won't work. So it will consider this default constructor as a main constructor. So now what you have to do is, when you are creating a method, if you are calling this method, you must pass these parameters. Okay, so now I pass these values through constructor. Okay, so when you are passing, okay, here no need to specify D, or no need to specify F, or no need to specify D, or no need to specify L also. Okay, it automatically takes. Okay, here we have character. Let me assign as a character, right? Put it in the single quotes. Do not assign in double quotes. It takes as a string. Hello, and your object is some null object. See, so are we missing anything? Still it is showing error. So 10, 100,000. Okay, let me remove these DF, these things. No, still we have some error. What is the error? It is showing the constructor int. Okay, fine. Double and double. That is also fine. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, character, boolean, string. Okay, object I didn't assign. Okay, here up to string only it is taking. Okay, here did I assign object? Yes, there is a object also. Object 2. Then why it is not taking? String and null. Okay, is undefined. Okay. So here, yeah, we can pass this value, but why it is okay? Let me do one thing. Let me use like this. Whether it is accepting or not, let's see. This is also, it is not accepting. Wait, let me remove it. This I will explain later. Still we are getting the error. Are we missing anything? No, right? Okay, we are not missing anything. So start int, long, float, double, char, boolean, string and object. That is fine. Okay, so what I do is new. Our class name is constructor, right? Just when I press control space, it gives you the value. So now I can change 0. So not 0, 10. So here 100, int is 1000, long is 10,000 L, float is 100.00 F. Similarly, double 1000.00D, some character, boolean value, string is some hello, and object is null. Okay, it should not give error, but why we are getting error?
Shiva, that spelling construct, starting constructor example.
Where?
Sir, when you give
Okay, let me
F,
copy. Wait.
it is showing as error, sir. For float F double D, then only it is showing error.
So here you are asking me to remove it.
Yes, sir.
Then still it is giving the error. Something is missing again. So this is my constructor. Okay, so we can assign the values to our constructor. This is fine. Boolean string. Okay, like are we in the same order? Yes. See, when we like assign the values, that time only it will give you the error. Okay, but here it is giving some other error. Is undefined. Change the constructor to short int, long float, double char, boolean string object to. Oh, okay. Yeah. So here, so I think I already explained this. Okay, I already explained this earlier in while now explaining the methods. Okay, when you pass your parameters to your methods, okay, by default, it gives you the preference to integers. Okay, why it gives the preference to integers? Because when you perform some operation on your lower type of data, okay, especially for byte, the capacity of byte is 127. Okay, suppose if you are performing some operation with two different types of byte data, okay, so the result might increase the value, right? So in that case, it cannot store that data into that byte type. Similarly, short also have the same thing. So that is the reason it is asking to use integer and integer. Okay, so this you can convert to your byte. This you can convert to your short. Okay, now again, is it showing any error? So what is the error it is showing? Change the constructor. Okay, int, long float, double char, boolean string object to. So again we converted to int, long float, and so long, okay, double and double. Again, the same thing, the same problem. Okay, instead of using float, it is asking to use the double. Okay, so when we perform the operation, so we might get some huge values. Okay, that is the reason it is asking to. Okay, type conversion. See, observe here. I'm just converting into float. I will pass the float value only. Okay, I'm converting. So it takes as a double. I'm converting to float. Okay, the preference, the default preference is int, long, double, string, and object. Okay, so the remaining like object capacity, the remaining variables capacity, data types capacity is very less. Okay, when we perform operations, the product value we may get a huge value, right? So that is the reason. Okay, it is giving the priority to higher data types. Okay, so this is one of the rule. Okay, in interviews also they will ask you. Okay, can we pass int short byte and float through the methods? Okay, so while practicing only you will get these errors, and by going through the suggestions provided by your JVM, you can understand more. Okay, so through the constructor also you can assign the values to your global variables. Okay, not only for instance, you can also assign for your static variables also. Okay, so instead of this, you can also use static variables and instance variables. For both you can assign through the constructor. Okay, what is the use then? If I am I can directly assign the values, right? But what is the use then? So whatever the value you want, okay, while using this class, that time you can assign the data. So not only in this class, suppose if you are creating this main method into some other class, okay, suppose if you want to access all this data and its methods, so whatever the data you want to pass, that data you can pass through the constructor. Okay, this is very, very important. Okay, when you use constructor, okay, when you call this default method, by default what happens is in backend it will allocate the memory, right? Okay, in backend it will allocate the memory. So like this it will allocate the memory, right? So suppose if you create multiple objects, multiple memory will be created. So while creating it, okay, so whatever the object we created, that object will be represented with this keyword. Why this keyword? Suppose let me write one more method, display instance variables. Display instance variables. This is a wide method. So now, if I want to print my instance variables, what is the notation I'm using? I have to use this particular reference, right? This object reference, right? Okay, this object is created in the backend like this. I'm using that reference, right? So suppose if I use the same data, if I print the same data here, okay, let me remove from here. So by default, which reference variable working here? So if you want to access in your method, you must allocate the memory. So with that reference, you are accessing. But here in the instance method, without using any reference, how we are able to access? Okay. So by default, when you create the object, so there is a keyword, this keyword by default, even though you specify or don't specify, so it will act as a object reference. Object reference. Okay, it acts as a object reference. But it is only acts for instance methods, not for static methods. Again, you cannot use this keyword inside the static methods. Okay, remember this. Suppose if you try to use this keyword instead of this reference, you cannot use. Static, you cannot. In the static methods, you cannot use. Give me like 1 minute. Okay, so I will get. Yeah. So while creating the instance, okay, by default, what happens is in the backend, one default reference also will be created. That default reference is this keyword. But this keyword is only applicable for your constructor and your instance methods, not applicable for your static method. And also this constructor, there will be no return type. Similarly, this is not instance and this is not static. So by default, it is an instance, of course. You cannot use static also, static constructor. You will get the error. You cannot use static also. This is also an interview question. Okay, because by default, your JVM cannot allocate the memory for your class. Okay, you have to, class members, instance members. So you have to allocate memory by using this queue. Okay. Yeah. So using constructor, you can initialize the values. If you want, you can create more than one constructor. More than one constructor. Suppose I don't want to assign these many values. Okay. So suppose, okay, I want to only print default values. I don't want to print these values. What you can do is you can create one more constructor without assigning any value. So now, if I call with this constructor with values, so it will assign those values. Okay. If I call without values, it will print the default values again. So again, it is printing default values. So you can write the constructor, duplicate constructor with parameters and without parameters also. So not only constructor, suppose with parameters and without parameters. Suppose if you are creating a method void addition int a comma int b. Okay. So suppose if you create some method with parameters you created, right? With the same name, you can also create without parameter with the same name. Okay, based on the data you pass, it will take that data. Okay, like this, you can create n number of methods with same name. Okay, but you should show the difference. Okay, you should maintain the difference among all these methods. So here, if you observe, there is difference between this method and this method. This is with parameters and this is without parameters. The same method you can create more than one argument with the existing method. See. Okay, so all these concepts we will discuss later. This is a separate topic. So to understand the constructor, duplicate constructor. So if you want, you can create constructor like this. Suppose if you want to assign only for 2 variables, not for all. For short and byte only, I want to assign the data. So now instead of calling it, what you can do? So you can call the constructor with those two parameters. Other remaining values, it will allocate the default values. Suppose if I pass 100 and 200. Okay, so in this place, in this instance place, okay, it will print 100, 200 remaining default values we will get. So like that, you can create a number of constructors. Okay, every time what happens is in the backend, memory will be allocated separately. Okay, how? Suppose if you uncomment these 3 lines. Okay, so again you have to give the different reference. In the backend, memory part will be different again. Okay, if you observe this screenshot, I mean this diagram. So like these two objects, it allocates one more object. There it will store the values. Okay, in the first object, whatever the values are you are assigning, those values will be stored. And in the second object, default values will be stored. And the third object, okay, the two values will be stored along with that default values for other variables. Okay, do not confuse this constructor, also very, very important. Okay, we create the parameterized constructor like this, and through the constructor we assign the different objects. How to do that we discuss in the Selenium. Okay, just understand the concept. What is the use of constructor? Okay, to initialize the values, to assign the values. By default, it is initializing the default values. If you want, you can assign your own values, own data. Fine. Okay. Any doubt in constructor?
Yeah, no, Shiva, got it.
Okay, you got it, right? Okay. So let me explain wrapper classes. Okay, what is wrapper class? I will explain now. Okay, so before that, so type conversions we have seen, right? So here I have explained one example. So let me copy the same thing to my wrapper classes. I'm creating the example as wrapper classes. Okay, so by looking at this name only, wrapper class, okay, you have to understand the concept. Okay, so that is the reason they given the names as some meaningful names they have given. Okay, wrapper class, string, constructor. Okay, so these we already seen, right? How to convert primitive data types to another primitive data type to another primitive data type. Right? These we already seen. Okay, so let me remove these. And also I will remove this everything to explain again. Here you are getting error. Here you are getting the error. You might feel that this I already explained. Okay. Suppose there is a byte. Byte 1 is byte type. Some 100 you assign. Okay, in integer also you assign 100. Okay, so in byte 2, if you want to assign that integer value, okay, let me create int byte 2 to int 1. Okay, this is byte. Suppose if you create like this, even though byte type can hold the value 100, you cannot assign directly. Okay, because by default it checks the memory, then it checks the loss of data. Okay, this you cannot directly assign. Similarly, short also. Short 1, you cannot assign integer value. Okay, if you want to assign, what you have to do, the data which is in the form of integer, bigger data type, that you have to convert into your your data type. What is the data type you are using to store that data type? Converting to int to byte, you can specify like this. Bigger values you can convert into your own data type. Suppose if you take int 2, if you want to assign byte value, you can simply assign, because smaller values can fit into the bigger type. There is no restriction. If you apply the same thing, for string, you have a string. Okay, when you run it, okay, this value looks like, okay, when you getting this value is appearing like normal number only, but still it is not a normal number when you enclose it with double quotes. Okay, so you might feel that when you are assigning to integer value type or float data type or long data type, you might feel that this is a bigger data type. That is the reason it is giving the error. You might feel like this. But the thing is, the type is completely different. This is a non-primitive data type and this is a primitive data type. Suppose if you want to convert into your long type, you might feel that it is a bigger data type, like that you are feeling, and you are trying to convert into long type. Still you are getting the error. Why it is getting error? So by default, we cannot convert reference data types, non-primitive data types, to our primitive data types. Okay, so what are non-primitive data types? If you create a variable, okay, with some class name, some class format name. So if you observe here string, if you observe, it is in the form of class interface and enum format, naming convention. If you take object, that is also. Okay, so but object has one, that I will explain again. Object has one characteristic that can act as a primitive and non-primitive. Okay, do not confuse it. Of course, again we have to use the conversion also, but not like string. Okay, so let me explain that before, after that we can come to the string class. Suppose if you have object obj1 some 100, if you want to assign to some byte b1 equals to obj1. Okay, here you are getting error, right? That you can simply convert to byte. Okay, even though it is a non-primitive data types, you can use it as a primitive data type like this. Okay, this is primitive data type, right? How you converted your primitive bigger data type to smaller type. Similar way you can convert. That is the use of object. Object can hold any type of data. It can hold primitive data type and also non-primitive data type. That is the reason we have this flexibility. Coming to remaining all other except object, remaining all other, if you want to convert directly, you cannot convert. How you have to convert? You have to write a logic to convert the values. Okay, like how we are creating the methods. Okay, so like that you have to accept that string, that you have to encode it in the form of ASCII or something other like formats you have to use. Then you have to convert. You have to write a huge logic to convert it. So we have some classes in Java. Somebody is already implemented those logics to convert string data type to number format, number data type. String data type to number data type, if you want to convert. So we have some predefined classes, Java only provided. Those classes, we call it as wrapper classes. Why they are calling as wrapper classes? Before that, we have to understand why they are calling as wrapper classes. Okay. Suppose let's now take the layman example. Okay, so suppose there is a chocolate. Let's take 5-star chocolate. Okay, so with 5-star chocolate, you get that chocolate with the wrapper. Okay, so in the wrapper, you will have that chocolate, right? So still you have the cover. The chocolate, you call it as a chocolate only. Okay, you will not call that packet as some other with other name. Similarly, for integer, byte, float, short, all these things, we have wrapper classes. For example, suppose I have int data type, right? For integer data type, I have a wrapper class integer. Okay, so both are same, even though names are different. Okay, the usage will be same. For example, int a equals to 100. In integer b equals to, you can assign a. Okay, suppose if you create integer c equals to some 1000. Okay, int d equals to c, you can directly assign. There is no difference for normal int and integer. So that is the reason. Okay, even though you call the along with the cover, if you call a chocolate, if you remove the cover, if you call the chocolate, it becomes chocolate only. Similarly, here, if you declare with primitive data type, if you declare with non-primitive data type, it becomes integer only. There is no change. Okay, but when we create the variable with primitive non-primitive data type, what is the advantage? Okay, why we are creating non-primitive data types? So we can create the logics also, right, inside that. Instead of like along with putting the data, we can also create the logics. Similarly, in these non-primitive data types, technically we can call it as classes. That is the reason it is a wrapper class. It is a wrapper for your primitive data type, but it is a class. So your class can contain data and methods. Similarly, your wrapper classes also contains methods. Okay, with the help of these wrapper classes, you can convert your string data type to your like primitive data type. Suppose if you want to convert the string to your non-primitive data type integer, how you can use is integer, which means you can store only integer value. So again, let me explain this. You will confuse again. Integer e equals to 100.00, you cannot store. Okay, if you put f, you cannot store because it is not a wrapper for integer. Okay, it is wrapper for int only. You can store only integer type of value. Okay, remember it. Similarly, for float, we have float wrapper class. For byte, we have byte wrapper class. Those I will explain. So if you want to convert, okay, so in integer class, we have methods. Okay, parseInt is the method which can convert your string value to integer value. Suppose if you want to convert this value to int, you can convert to int, and that you can directly store into your integer. Similarly, if you want to convert the same thing to byte, if you want to convert the same thing to byte, so you have byte class. Again, method also is byte, parse byte, and that you can assign to byte. Okay, so the variable name you can take it as byte. If you want to convert into short, you have a short class. So the method name is parse short, and you can store it into short. Some s2. Long, convert to long. Use long class. The same names only. Okay, parse long. Okay, convert to, this is long, some L2. I want to convert into some float. For float also we have float class. float. So whenever you say class, it starts with the capital letter. Okay, remember it. So inside the class, we can have methods. Parse float string. Similarly, double, we have double class. Okay, so do we have any other number formats? Because it is a number. Okay, again, this value you cannot convert into char, or you cannot convert into like a boolean. Okay, because it is a number. Suppose if you have string string to some false. This if you want to convert into boolean, you can convert boolean b2. So do we have b2 here? No, right? So b2. So we have a boolean class, boolean dot parse boolean string 2. It will allow bool2. If you have some character, single character, some a that you want to convert to char, yes, you can convert. So generally character type we don't use these so generally for character data type we don't use these wrapper classes. So basically string itself is a collection of characters. Again, no need to convert. Okay, if you want to convert, how you can convert is, so you have to use string dot we have in string class. Okay, we have methods. So strn is a string now. So caret of 0 if you use, you can get that character. Okay, again, no need to use the wrapper classes. We have character array, we have a class character. Okay, it is also a type of char. Some character you can assign like this using character class. Okay, that you can convert into directly assigned to your prim2 char. Okay, so this character we use for different purpose. Okay, what is that? I will explain later. So these wrapper classes defines the types. How prim2 data types describing the type of your variable. Similarly, these wrapper classes also same as prim2 data types, but these acts as classes. You can have methods inside those classes. Okay. So this is the usage of wrapper class. Suppose if you are fetching some data from the web browser, so generally using Selenium, whatever the data we get from the web browser, that comes as a string. If you want to perform some operation on some number, you are fetching number from web browser, that is coming as a string, but you want to multiply with some number, you have to convert into your required like a number type, right? So that time it will use these we can use for that purpose. You can convert to your required data type, number data type, and you can perform the operation. Similarly, if you want to do the vice versa means, suppose I want to convert, I have a character, right? I want to convert as a string. How I can convert to string? So string is a class. Inside that we have static methods. how we can access the static methods directly? With the help of class name, right? So we have method value of. If you pass ch3, it becomes string now, that you cannot assign to your character, that you have to assign to your string only. ch3 is a character, but if you convert into string, that you cannot convert to character. So you must use the string. See, in string, so it is converted to string. Suppose if you have some number, some int, some number equals to some 1000, some 10,000. This you want to convert as a string. Sometimes, not sometimes, in Selenium, if you want to set some value to some field in browser, you have to pass that value as a string. Number it won't accept. All the methods in the Selenium, okay, which are setting the values, send keys method, it accepts only string. But if you want to convert this as a string, just simply use string dot value of. You can convert into strings. Directly you can assign the value, or you can use the variable also. There is no difference. Instead of value, you are using the reference. Okay, string also have so many methods. Most of the time you will get questions on string only. 99% questions you will get on string. Okay, I will take a separate class for this string. Okay. Okay, so any doubts in wrapper class? Okay, what is the use? At least are you able to like understand what is the use of wrapper class? What is the use? Somebody tell me.
Convert the string value to primitive data types.
And again, see, suppose if you have a string str6 equals to 10. Okay, this is 10. Suppose if you want to convert, see, so let me run it. Okay, if I run it, so you will not get any error now. Okay, so here we are getting some class cast exception somewhere in line number 18. Yeah, so here also, yeah, so that is the problem. So object, yeah, so it appears as a yeah, like this, but you will get, so this is very good example. This is very good example to explain the collections. Okay, so here also, if you want to convert, okay, you should use wrapper class again. Class cast exception. Object to byte. Why it is? So again, here you cannot use parse byte. So let me use byte dot parse byte. So it accepts only string. Okay, it won't accept other values. So how I can convert this into number? Okay, this value I want to convert to number. How I can convert? So we have one notation. So generally, if I use integer, it should allow us to, let me make like this. It is not available, no? Yeah, so this object type I will explain, because so again we have one concept. So while assigning the value, okay, even though we assign as a like number to object, okay, while accessing we will get the issue. So to convert object to our required type, again we have one more option that I will explain tomorrow. Okay, or while explaining the collections, I will explain. So here it is a small thing. Okay, so let me run it. Okay, so some 10 is printing. Okay, somewhere we are printing 10. So here we are printing 10. That is the reason it is printing. Suppose here I have a string 10. If I want to convert to number, that I cannot convert. Okay, suppose if you are using integer dot parseInt, if you convert str6, here again you get the class cast exception. Okay, suppose if you storing into int7. Okay, so while using it, it won't show any compilation error, but you will get the execution error, runtime error. Okay, class cast exception, some number format exception. Okay, so in line number 65, you are getting number format exception. Got it? So only if you have number, again here you are assigning false, right? Suppose if I use capital F, let's see. So here wrapper class 65. Okay, so it is allowing capital F, but if I like change it to some hello, you will get the error at hello only. So still it is showing for string 2. So here it is not showing the error at this line number 45. Still we are getting error. Okay, let me comment it. Let me try run. So boolean it is taking hello. So how then what is the value of bool2? Let me print. By default it prints false. Yeah, that is the reason. Okay, it is unable to understand it. By default, the default value it is printing. But coming to so these integer, it won't print the default value because it always look for the value and try to convert to that type. So in this case, whatever the value you will give, okay, it takes as a by default value it will print. Suppose if you give true, that time only it prints the true. Okay, I hope you understand understood this. What is the use of wrapper class, right? So tomorrow, we will I will explain other topics. Other topics we have access modifiers, very important in encapsulation. And what else we have from encapsulation? Yeah, access modifiers is pending from the encapsulation. Then we can start the inheritance. Okay, tomorrow. So first off, I will complete the access modifiers. Okay, after that I will start inheritance.